Hi, it's Jo from Minerva. Today I'm going to show you how to line the bodice of a dress and go through some of the processes of making a dress from a pattern that you've not used before. The pattern I'm going to use today is McCall's M7714. I'm going to make this picture version here with very short sleeves. The features of it are you can have a V-neck and a flared skirt, or you can have a waistband, and then there's pleats in the skirt, which I'll show you as well on another video. And today I'm going to show you how to put the dress zip in the back and how to line the bodice. The fabric I'm using today is a cotton sateen, and sateen is a really smooth finish of cotton. So the cotton has not quite a shine to it, but it has a kind of luster that makes it really smooth on the right side. And because the weave is really dense, then it really takes bright colours well. So if you search sateen, S-A-T-E-E-N, if you search that on our website, you'll find a lot of bright colours, because this type of fabric is very dense. So it can take really bright colours of dyes. I'm wearing a dress made from cotton as well. This is lined, so this has a satin lining on the inside. And this isn't a sateen fabric, this is a cotton poplin. It doesn't have that same smoothness on the surface, but it's really comfortable for making summer dresses. So if you're new to sewing, you might be wondering why you line a bodice. Well, there's a couple of different reasons. So you might have a fabric that's quite light or sheer, like a cotton lawn, that might have a lining behind on the bodice, but then you have a gathered skirt where you've got plenty of fabric to give you sort of underwear coverage. You might line a bodice so that it makes the fabric more stable. So if you've got some structured things, like a structured neckline pieces, then you might add lining. You might also add lining to make sure that you enclose all of your seams. So if you're making a dress that's more complicated than just a shift dress with darts, you've got princess seams, which are the ones that go around here, then you might be wanting to cover up all of those seams on the inside. There are lots of different lining fabrics to choose from. It depends what sort of fabric you're sewing with as your outer. It's a little bit the same rule as you have with interfacing, which is you don't want your lining to be any stronger than your outer fabric. So you need it to be the same or less in weight. So you might be using your actual fabric to line. So this is a sateen. It's a stretch sateen. It's got a very close weave. It's quite structured, and it made this vintage dress. But to keep the structure, it was actually lined with some more of the same fabric, so that holds quite strong sleeves. It holds this bar across that goes across the back. So you might be asked on your pattern to line with the fabric that you've bought for the outer. We also do lining that's got a pattern on it. So this one's embossed. So this lining is for the inside of a jacket. So you might take your lining to another level where it's patterned. This is a polyester lining. It's really cheap to buy. It's used to put in skirts, line bodice on summer dresses. I've used it on the back of this everyday waistcoat, so this isn't a special occasion one. It's easy to work with, but you do need to turn your iron down. This one is a satin lining, so it's got a gloss to it, so it's a little bit more special occasion. So this is a wedding waistcoat, and the fabric is a lot smoother. It's a little bit quieter, if that makes sense. It just doesn't make so much noise as the other one, and it just looks a little bit more special. But you could line a skirt with that. You can line the inside of dresses with that as well. That's what I've got in here. I've got some shiny lining. You can get ones with a pattern on, so this is a paisley pattern, or you can get a jacquard one, which is a little bit firmer, so that's quite nice for the back of a waistcoat or inside jackets. or you can really make a statement with lining. So this coat was made with some vintage fabric and the lining is green rather than black. So you would imagine when I open this coat that the lining would be black, but instead it's a green lining, and it's the same as the grey one. It's that really nice satin finish lining, and actually the leftovers from that is what I line this with. The lining I'm using today is just an anti-static lining. It comes in a whopping 58 colours, so you should be able to get a good match with whatever fabric you're using. Of course you can just use bits of lining up that you've got, but you have to be really careful, because if you put a dark lining behind a light fabric, you will alter the colour of it a little bit, especially if it's got white flowers on like mine has. If I put a navy lining behind that because I've got a bit left over, then I would see that sort of navy colour would dull out the white flowers. So it comes in 58 different colours. Find the colour that you need to match your fabric. If you're starting a pattern that you've not had before, it's a really good idea to make a toile. So I've toiled the bodice at size 6 because my daughter's 13. So she has had this bodice made for her, but then we made some alterations. So you can see the neck was too baggy, so I've taken a dart on the neck. The armholes were a little bit big, so I altered the shoulders and I took a little bit out of the bust. So once you've made a toile and you've got all of your pieces in this is just a curtain lining, when you've got all this ready in a curtain lining, then you're ready to cut your outer fabric. At this point, you don't cut the lining yet. You need to make sure that you've got the outer the right size, so that then you can cut the lining to the right size. After I fitted the toile, I then measured a 1.5 seam allowance and trimmed it back to 1.5 all the way along. I actually drew on the seam line so that I could be sure that I would have the same pattern piece for when I cut the outer. So then I took it apart, used a lot smaller pins here. These are little dressmaking pins because you can really get it to go round a curve really well. Not quite so aggressive when you're fitting somebody either than the larger glass head pins. And then I moved away from the paper pattern pieces, and I used these as the pattern pieces, because if this is the fitted garment, then this is the piece that I want to cut. So then you make up the bodice. I've stay stitched the neck line because I'm working with this and fitting it, so I don't want the neck to stretch out. And on the inside, on this sateen, it's quite a light sateen, I've just pink and sheared the edges. You can see there, because I want those to press out really flat, because on a princess seam I don't want to see an overlocked or a zigzag sort of ridge coming through to the front side of the fabric. So here I've got that going really, really flat and smooth. And because I'm going to line the bodice, all this will be hidden and encased inside the lining. Okay, over at the cutting table, we have cut out all of the lining pieces. It's tricky with lining because obviously it's hard to find a right side and a wrong side, and it doesn't really have one, but you want to make sure that you get all of your pieces in the right order, and it's a really good idea to lay them out flat so that you make sure you don't mix up any pieces, and you make sure you get all the seams facing the right way. It does fray a little bit, lining fabric, so I'm going to sew those together on those seams, like there is a good example, and then I'm going to finish those edges with an overlocker or a zigzag, because that won't affect the finish on the outside the same as where we pink and sheared. So we could pink and shear these, or we could finish them with overlocking, but as long as we finish them, because they will fray. It's really important to make sure that you use exactly the same seam allowance as the outer shell that you've made, otherwise the one piece won't fit inside another piece. To keep the same seam allowance on the outer and the lining, you can use a handy magnet gauge. It sticks to your foot plate, And then as you sew, your fabric runs up against the edge of this piece of metal and your stitch line remains 1.5. So you have the same for the outer shell and the lining. I find it quite useful to lay out my pieces back in the right order again as I'm sewing them, so I can make sure that this one I will definitely pin so that I've got that seam coming the same way, and over here I've done this one. So I'm just going to make sure now when I attach this back piece that it has the seam on the wrong side. We've got to the stage where we have the outer all pressed, pink and shirred, and the lining all pressed, and this one is overlocked, but you could zigzag it or you could have pink and shirred that as well. So now I'm going to put the two pieces inside each other. If your dress hasn't got sleeves, you might be asked to do it a different way. So you might be asked to sew around the armholes and then turn it through, like when you add a facing. Or if you've got sleeves, your sleeves won't be lined and your lining will go just to the shoulder and around the armhole. So I'm going to match up the shoulder seams of the lining with the shoulder seams of the dress. I'm going to pin that and sew that all the way round. This is the neckline pinned. I've taken the stay stitching out now because I want that curve to move freely, but you can see that my lining is just peeping over my pin line. So here I've got an extra bit of lining coming through on the inside because I want that lining to be rolled over onto the inside. I want to make sure that the pink doesn't roll into my neckline, because that's one of the things that can really spoil lining a dress, is when you see it from the right side. So a little tip is just to take 2 or 3 mil, only a teeny weeny tiny bit, onto the inside, and then that will pull the lining into the inside when you press it afterwards. And there we are, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for the lining to be very much on the inside and just that tiny roll of your outer fabric along the top, so that from the front there's no lining showing at all. Okay, so you've got the armhole and then you've got your lining armhole, and you're just going to turn that under and pin it all the way around the arm, and then you're going to hand sew that down. That's what gives it a nice finish, and there'll be no sewing showing from the right side. You're just going to keep turning that and pinning it as you go around the armhole. You might need to just adjust it a bit as you go, but you need to be getting so that your side seam matches up with the underarm seam. So that one definitely needs to go there. Then I can adjust any others to match. When you've attached the lining, then to finish the waist, you would turn up the waist edge of the lining and attach it on the waist edge of the skirt, and that makes it super smooth on the inside. And you hand sew that down, and then you won't get all of those bulk seams around your waist tickling you, because they'll all be encased in that lining. To finish the lining on the back, after you've put the zip in, you just turn the raw edge of the lining under and sew it by hand along the edge of the zip. You don't need it too close or it will interfere with the the zip running up and down, so you need to make sure that it's just far enough away to stay out of the way of the zip. So that's your last bit of hand sewing for lining. Thanks for watching. I hope that's helped you think about maybe lining a bodice or choosing a pattern that's the next level up for you, so that you can line it, make it really comfy, make it a beautiful finish on the inside. All the products we've used are listed below, so if you'd like to choose a lining that I've used today, it works really well. It's not expensive, but it really does give a completely different feel to your dress. If you've got any questions, please put them below and we can try and answer them for you, or we can help you to find whatever it is that you're looking for. Don't forget to make a profile and share all your makes on Minerva. We love to see what everybody's been making, and it's a great place to chat and share your ideas with the sewing community.